Ready for another deep dive? Today we're going deep into a story that has Silicon Valley buzzing, the journey of Suchir Balaji, an AI researcher at OpenAI whose time there took a really unexpected turn.
Yeah, it's a story that I think really shows the tension between, how fast technology is moving and the consequences that can come with it.
Exactly right. Imagine this. Balaji, he's this amazing coder, fresh out of UC Berkeley, lands his dream job at OpenAI back in 2020. Sounds like a perfect start. Classic tech success story, right?
You would think so, but things at OpenAI weren't quite as picture perfect as they seem from the outside. You see, by 2024, Balaji started getting really concerned about the way the company was doing things, especially the types of data that they were using to train their AI models.
Yeah.
We're talking about pulling like massive amounts of information from the internet, and a lot of it we learned was copyrighted material. Books, articles, you name it.
Wow.
Even code from private repositories.
Whoa, private code too. I mean, isn't that like a legal minefield?
It is, and it really raises some tough questions about where you draw the line in the digital age, right? I mean, what's considered fair use when you're training an AI and what crosses the line?
Yeah, huge question. And I bet a lot of companies are trying to figure that out right now. But okay, back to Balaji. What did he do when he saw all these like red flags at OpenAI? He didn't just like stay quiet, did he?
No, no, he didn't. It seems like the internal struggle just became too much for him to handle, you know? He felt like he had to do something. So he went to the New York Times with his story.
Wow, a whistleblower, right? The heart of Silicon Valley. I mean, that takes guts, especially when you think about all the secrecy there and those ironclad NDAs everyone has to sign.
It does. Whistleblowing is never easy, especially in a field that's, as fast-paced and competitive as tech. There's a lot of pressure to keep things under wraps, but, that's exactly why it's so important for people to speak up when they see something wrong.
Absolutely. So Balaji goes public. What kind of reaction did he get?
His story, I mean, it sent shockwaves through the tech community and honestly beyond that too. I mean, here's this, bright young researcher and he's shining a light on what's happening at one of the most powerful AI companies in the world, right? People started asking some really tough questions about data privacy, intellectual property, and the responsibility that these tech companies have to be ethical.
It's almost like he pulled back this curtain and showed everyone this side of AI development that most people hadn't even thought about.
Exactly. And that kind of transparency, I mean, it can be really disruptive, especially in an industry that, thrives on secrecy and always trying to be the first to do something new.
But that disruption can also be a good thing, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
can be like a catalyst for positive change. Did,
Mhm.
did anything actually change at OpenAI or in the wider tech industry because of what Balaji did?
Well, that's a question that people are still trying to figure out. I mean, right after he came forward, OpenAI put out a statement saying that they needed to be more transparent and do a better job of sourcing data responsibly. And they said they would review their policies and, have more conversations about the ethical implications of their work.
Okay, so at least they acknowledged it and promised to do better. But did they actually take any real action?
Well, that's where things get a bit more complicated because I mean this whole situation was unfolding really quickly and it had, huge implications. And even while OpenAI was making those statements, something much bigger was about to happen.
Wait, so things took another turn? What happened?
Well, just a few weeks after Balaji's interview with the New York Times, on November 26, 2024, he was found dead in his apartment
Oh, wow.
and authorities ruled it a suicide.
That is just tragic. This young guy, so much potential, loses his life after trying to do the right thing.
It's a stark reminder of the pressure that whistleblowers face and the risks that come with challenging, these powerful institutions. Balaji's death, I mean, it sparked a lot of grief and outrage, but it also led to this much deeper conversation about the ethical responsibilities of the entire tech industry and the need to protect whistleblowers better, to give them more support.
I can't imagine how the tech community reacted to this news. It must have been a real like wake-up call.
It was. It wasn't just this abstract debate anymore about AI and what it could do. It was about a real person, someone who a lot of people in the industry admired, for his brilliance and his courage. Balaji's death really, it brought the human cost of these ethical dilemmas into focus.
Yeah, it makes it all very real. So what happened after that? Did Balaji's death lead to any changes at OpenAI or in the tech world in general? Were there like any new policies or regulations to actually protect whistleblowers?
Well, that's a question that's still being debated and analyzed. I mean, some people say that Balaji's death was a turning point, that it forced the industry to finally confront its ethical blind spots and start taking concrete steps toward more transparency and accountability.
Right.
But others are more cynical. They think that real change is slow and that, these powerful companies will always find ways to protect their interests.
Yeah, I can see both sides of that. But let's dig a little deeper. What specific changes, if any, do we see after Balaji's passing?
One of the most immediate responses was a big increase in calls for better whistleblower protections in the tech industry. Employee advocacy groups, legal experts, even some lawmakers started pushing for legislation that would make it easier for tech workers to report wrongdoing without being afraid of losing their jobs or facing retaliation.
Right, because Balaji's story really showed how vulnerable whistleblowers are, especially when they're going up against these huge tech companies.
Exactly. And it's not just about laws. There needs to be a culture shift within the tech industry too. All the secrecy and the fear of speaking out, it's created this environment where ethical concerns are often just ignored.
So we need a system where people feel like they can come forward, knowing that they'll be protected and that their concerns will actually be taken seriously.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a challenge that goes way beyond just one company or even one industry, right? It's a societal issue that we all need to think about.
It really is. So we've got this complex situation with legal challenges, cultural shifts, and the very real human cost of speaking truth to power. Where do we go from here? What's the next chapter in this story?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting because Balaji's whistleblowing didn't just shake up the tech world. It also caught the attention of lawmakers and regulators who had already been, kind of wary of the power that Silicon Valley has.
Oh, so the government starts to get involved. Now the stakes are even higher.
Exactly. And as we continue our deep dive, we're going to explore how Balaji's story ended up being this catalyst for legislation and sparked all these debates about data privacy, regulating AI, and even, the whole future of innovation in the digital age.
That sounds like a real turning point. I'm
Yeah.
definitely ready to hear more about how this all played out and what it means for the future of AI and, well, for all of us.
Picking up where we left off, what Balaji revealed about OpenAI's data practices, it really struck a chord with lawmakers. They were already kind of on edge about the whole big tech situation, their power and influence and all that.
So it sounds like his story was like the final push, the thing that made the government decide to finally step in and do something.
You could definitely say that. I mean, for years, there had been all this talk about, whether to regulate AI and if so, how to do it, especially when it came to like data privacy and the potential for things to go wrong. But when Balaji came forward, and then especially after his death, it made all those concerns so much more real.
Yeah, it's not just some hypothetical risk anymore. It's like, whoa, this actually happened.
Exactly. And so lawmakers started asking these really tough questions like, should companies be allowed to just grab tons of data from the internet, including stuff that's copyrighted without anyone, keeping an eye on them? What does that mean for like individual privacy and intellectual property rights? And maybe the biggest question of all, how do we make sure that AI development doesn't, spiral out of control?
Those are some heavy questions, and I imagine there were some pretty heated arguments about how to answer them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, on the one hand, you had people who were pushing for like really strict regulations. They were saying that we need to protect individual rights and prevent AI from being used to harm people. And they pointed to Balaji's case as proof of what can happen when these tech companies get too much power.
So they were like, this is a wake-up call. We need to rein in big tech, set some clear boundaries.
Yeah, right. They were proposing things like really comprehensive data privacy laws and
Yeah.
limits on what kind of data could be used to train AI and stronger whistleblower protections, so that more people would feel safe coming forward if they saw something wrong.
Makes sense. But I'm guessing there were also people who weren't so thrilled about the government getting involved, right?
Oh, for sure. On the other side, you had the folks who were saying that too much regulation would, stifle innovation and it would hurt the U.S. tech industry's ability to compete globally. They were worried that all these rules would slow down AI development and let other countries like China, take the lead.
So their argument was more like, hey, we need to be careful here, balance the risks with the potential benefits that AI could bring.
Yeah, they were saying that AI has the potential to, like, revolutionize so many industries, healthcare, transportation, energy, you name it. And we shouldn't risk all that progress by making it too hard for companies to innovate and develop new things.
It's that classic tension, right? Safety versus progress. And in the middle of all this, you've got Sushir Balaji, this young guy whose story became a symbol of how complicated this whole ethical side of AI really is.
It really highlights how technology is never neutral. It's shaped by the people who create it and the choices they make, and those choices, they have consequences for individuals, for society, for the whole future of innovation.
So where did all this debate end up? Did Balaji's story actually lead to any new laws or regulations?
It did. After he died, a few different bills were introduced in Congress, all aimed at tackling the issues he raised. One of the most important ones was called the Algorithmic Accountability Act, and it would have required companies to assess the impact of their AI systems on, things like fairness, bias, and privacy.
That sounds like a good step.
Yeah.
Did it pass?
It actually faced a lot of pushback from tech lobbyists, and in the end, it didn't make it through the Senate. But, it did get people talking about AI regulation, and it kind of paved the way for future efforts to address these issues.
Okay, so maybe not a total victory, but at least it got the ball rolling.
Definitely. And it wasn't just happening at the federal level either. Some states, like California and New York, started passing their own laws about AI, especially how it's used in things like, hiring and law enforcement.
So we're starting to see this patchwork of regulations popping up all over the place.
Yeah, and that's probably going to continue as AI becomes more and more, integrated into our lives. The challenge now is to find that balance, between encouraging innovation and making sure that people's rights are protected. And that's a conversation that needs to involve everyone, not just, politicians and tech companies.
Right, because ultimately it's our data, our privacy, our future that's at stake.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really important aspect of this story, something that goes beyond laws and regulations.
Okay, I'm listening. What else is there?
Well, Balaji's whistleblowing, it didn't just cause a stir in Washington, it also got regular people talking about AI and its place in our lives and the ethical questions that come with it.
So it became less of a tech industry issue and more of a societal concern.
Exactly. People started asking questions like, who owns my data? And how is AI being used to make decisions that, affect me? And what can I do to make sure AI is developed responsibly?
Those are some pretty fundamental questions. I bet that led to some pretty deep conversations.
It did. Universities started new research projects focused on AI ethics. Journalists began investigating the whole world of AI development, which can be pretty secretive. And regular people, everyday citizens, they started demanding more transparency and accountability from these companies that are creating these powerful technologies.
Sounds like a real shift in awareness was happening. Like people were realizing that AI wasn't just some sci-fi concept anymore. It was something that was actually affecting their lives.
Yeah, and that's only going to become more true as AI becomes, more and more a part of our everyday routines. Think about it, from the recommendations we see online to the healthcare we get to the jobs we do, AI is already playing a role, and it's only going to get bigger.
So this is where it really hits home for our listeners, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about some, dystopian future anymore. It's about the choices we're making right now, the data we share, the products we buy. All of that is feeding into how AI is being developed.
And it's about the questions we ask, the concerns we raise, the demands we make of the companies that are building this technology. The future of AI, it's not set in stone. It's something we're all creating, together.
Okay, so we've got this huge shift happening from government regulation to public awareness, all because of what one young researcher did. But let's go back to the tech industry itself for a minute. How did Balaji's whistleblowing change the way companies were approaching AI development? Did they change any of their practices or policies?
They did, and this is where we really start to see the ripple effects of Balaji's actions spreading out. Some companies, facing public pressure and pressure from investors, they started to be more proactive about AI ethics. They hired ethicists, created internal review boards, and put out statements about their commitment to developing AI responsibly.
Sounds like a step in the right direction. But were those just PR moves, or were they actually making real changes?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something that experts are still debating. I mean, some people argue that these corporate initiatives are genuine attempts to really deal with these complex ethical challenges. They say that companies are putting a lot of resources into these efforts, and they're starting to, to be more open and transparent about how they're thinking about AI ethics.
So there's some reason for optimism, but also some healthy skepticism.
Exactly. Because there's always the concern that some of this is more about, managing risk and protecting their reputation than it is about really changing the way they do things.
So it's kind of a wait and see situation, right? We got to
Yep.
keep an eye on them and make sure they're actually walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for people to be aware of what's going on and to speak up. The more we demand transparency and accountability from these tech companies, the more likely they are to take these issues seriously.
So it's not just about leaving it to the experts or waiting for the government to do something. It's about all of us being informed and engaged and willing to hold these companies to a higher standard.
Absolutely. And that's a really important message to keep in mind as we continue our deep dive, because while Balaji's story might have started in Silicon Valley, its impact is much bigger than that. It's changed the way we think about AI, its potential, and its role in our society.
So to recap, we've seen how Balaji's whistleblowing kind of set off this chain reaction. Government investigations, public debate, and even tech companies
Yeah.
having to rethink how they do things. But there's another piece of this story that we haven't really talked about yet.
You're right. We've focused on, the legal and political fallout. But what about the people who are actually building these AI systems? What about the researchers, the engineers, the people who are, on the front lines of this whole technological revolution?
That's a good point. They're the ones who are like dealing with these ethical dilemmas every day.
Exactly. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, we're going to hear from some of those voices, explore the internal struggles they're facing, the moral compromises, and what they hope for and fear about the future of AI.
So far, we've talked about the laws, the regulations, the kind of big picture changes that are happening in the AI world. But let's talk about the people who are like actually building these AI systems. What's it like for them, knowing that their work has such a huge impact?
That's a part of the story that we don't hear enough about, right? We get caught up in the algorithms and all that, but there are actual people behind all of that, people who are making choices and dealing with the implications of those choices.
So let's focus on that for a minute, the human side of things.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that like AI developers are wrestling with these days?
Well, imagine you're working on this cutting edge technology, pushing the limits of what's possible, right? There's got to be this incredible sense of excitement, like you're part of something that could really change the world.
Yeah, I could see that.
But at the same time, there's this growing awareness of the potential downsides, right? The unintended consequences. Like we've seen how AI can be used to spread misinformation or to make existing biases worse, even to create like autonomous weapon systems. That's got to weigh on the people who are actually building these systems.
Yeah, it's like they have this incredible power in their hands, but
Yeah.
but they're not always sure how to use it responsibly.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And that kind of uncertainty can lead to a lot of, soul searching, a lot of internal debate.
Are there like any real world examples of this kind of like internal struggle happening?
Oh yeah, definitely. There have been cases where AI researchers have actually quit their jobs because they had ethical concerns about the projects they were working on. Some have become, really outspoken critics of the whole industry, calling for more transparency and accountability. And others are trying to like develop ethical frameworks and guidelines for AI development, trying to find ways to do it right.
So there's a whole range of responses from people who are like deeply troubled to those who are trying to find solutions from within.
Exactly. And there's no easy answer, right? These are complicated issues with big implications, and people are still figuring out the best way to move forward.
Yeah, I bet it can be pretty lonely for those who are struggling with these ethical dilemmas. It's not like they can just go to their boss and be like, "Hey, I'm having a moral crisis here."
Right. And that's why it's so important for the whole tech industry to create a culture where these conversations can happen, where people feel safe talking about their concerns together to find solutions.
So it's about moving away from that move fast and break things kind of mentality and being more thoughtful, more deliberate about how we innovate.
Exactly. And we are starting to see that shift happening, although it's slow. More and more tech companies are investing in these ethical AI initiatives, hiring ethicists, creating review boards, having public conversations about responsible AI development.
But is that enough? I mean, these tech companies are so powerful, so influential. Can we really trust them to regulate themselves?
That's a really good question, and one that we should all be thinking about. Self-regulation can work, but only if it's done in a way that's transparent and accountable.
So it's not just about writing up some nice-sounding ethical guidelines and then going back to business as usual. They need to be held accountable for actually putting those guidelines into practice and for fixing any harm that their AI systems might cause.
Exactly. And that's where the role of government, of civil society, of individual citizens becomes so important. We need strong regulations to make sure the AI is developed and used in a way that benefits everyone. We need independent watchdogs to keep an eye on the industry and hold companies accountable. And we need informed citizens who are, engaged in these issues and who are willing to demand better from the companies they interact with.
So this is a call to action for all of us, isn't it? It's not just about leaving it up to the experts or waiting for the government to fix things. It's about realizing that we're all shaping the future of AI through the choices we make, the actions we take, and the things we say.
Well said. And that brings us back to Suchir Balaji. His story, as tragic as it is, it reminds us of the human cost of AI development. It reminds us that behind all the algorithms and code, there are real people whose lives are being affected, for better or worse, by the choices that we make.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from all of this?
I hope they remember that the future of AI isn't set in stone. It's something that we're all creating together. And we have a responsibility to make sure it's a future that benefits everyone, not just a select few. A future where technology is used to empower people, not to exploit them. A future where innovation is guided by ethical principles and a deep respect for human dignity.
That's a powerful message to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and a huge thank you to our listeners for engaging with these really important topics. We encourage you to keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking those tough questions about the role of AI in our world. Until next time, everyone.